Welcome to the Cosmic Busker. My name is Bobby Cody. Phoenix Lights UFOs, my personal experience. This particular video was inspired by my previous video. I'll post a quick link to it up there. It was a flaming crashing UFO in West Virginia. In the comments of that particular video, one gentleman, I'll put up the comments he made there now. He wrote, "I totally agree that UFOs are hidden from us and believe in them 100%, and you make great points. Yeah, I don't really watch mainstream news anymore currently, but I would assume they would lie by omission." Now, I was going to type out a response to this individual, but instead I told him, you know what? I'm going to do a video response to your comment because it's worth a video response given my personal experience. And I think once you see my personal experience regarding the Phoenix Lights UFOs, you'll understand why I'm doing a video on this, because I have a very, very unique experience in this regard. Now, first, real quick, for those who aren't familiar, I'll throw up from Wikipedia. Phoenix Lights are a series of widely sighted, unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, observed in the skies of the U.S. states of Arizona, Nevada, and the Mexican state of Sonora on March 13, 1997. I'll throw up a photo of the lights over there so you can take a look at them right now. Now, this is March 13, 1997 is when this happened. You have to realize there were no smartphones, so very few people were carrying around cameras to take pictures of these UFOs. Basically, these UFOs, and this one particular that I'm showing you right now, that's Phoenix. All right, this is UFO. You can see the lights on the right-hand side. You'll see the 7 lights, and you see the 1 light in the back. That was one entire craft. Huge, about a mile or 2 long, I think they said. It sat over the city of Phoenix. Just sat there, stationary over Phoenix. And people are like, whoa, for hours. Just sat over Phoenix. Now, if UFO sits over a major United States city, you would expect it to be nationwide news the next day. Oh my gosh, UFO sits over, Phoenix just for hours. Thousands and thousands of people see it. No, not at all. I'm going to go right now. As you can see from this Wikipedia, it says there was minimal news coverage at the time of the incident. In Phoenix, a small number of local news outlets noted the event, but it received little attention beyond that. Now, I want to give you a little perspective on this because in the 1990s, internet was just starting to really get out to the populace. And those who did have internet and computers, very slow dial-up. I used to sit and wait for 4 or 5 minutes for a website to load up. That's how slow this was. But with that, I did have internet access at the time, so I was able to get access and learn about what was going on. So I knew about this before everybody else in the country did, because I had internet access, so I was able to read about this and see the photos on the internet. News media didn't cover it, so everybody around me had no idea what was going on. I was a journalism student at the time at Rutgers University. So I'm a journalism student. I see this huge presumably nationwide, should be a nationwide story about a UFO sitting over Phoenix for hours. Nobody covered it in the nation, just local Phoenix news, and that was it. I'm like, what the heck is going on, How can they not cover this? So I went into one of my classes, my journalism class. I'm a journalism professor. I didn't bring it up to him in class. I waited till everybody left. So it was just me and the professor. I walked up to him said, hey, I want to talk to you about something. And I started to tell him about this. He looks at me like big eyes, like almost frightened that I'm actually bringing this up. As I'm describing it, another professor walks into the classroom. He sees the professor. He goes, "Hey, hey, Joe, whatever the professor's doing. Hey, how you doing? We were just talking about the Yankee game." He was afraid to even discuss it with me to begin with, and then when another professor came in, he just said, "Oh yeah, we were just talking about the Yankee game." He didn't even want to be caught discussing this subject matter. Now, I wanted to tell him about how you know, this should be nationwide news and nobody was covering it. And obviously, his response showed that there was a great fear in the journalistic community to cover things like this. Um, why you can speculate on your own, but wow, that's at that point I actually ended up that was convinced me to drop out of journalism. I realized that there was no journalistic ethics whatsoever. That's when I stopped journalism as my major, and I eventually dropped out of college because this was a pattern. Several times I went up to professors because I'm a truth hunter and I find truths that are contrary to the dominant paradigm. And I would go up to another professor and say, "Hey, Watergate, I what we know about Watergate is completely different from what happened. Let me tell you what happened." And they're like, "Oh, he's saying the truth." And they get scared to death. Three different professors, three different subject matters, three different professors scared to death. I'm like, that's it. You go to university to learn the lies that they want you to know, not the truths. There's no question about it. It was at that point that I dropped out of university. So there I wanted to show how the news media is throttled and they don't tell you the truth and they hide things. But there's more to this, and it gets really fascinating at this point. So, you know, um, there's no news coverage. However, finally, 3 months after this UFO is sitting over Phoenix, 3 months, the national news media finally covers it. I'll put up a thing right there, right, just so I can read on it. It says, but on June 18, 1997, so the UFO was on March 17, I think it was 1997, March 13, 1997. Finally, 3 months later, on June 18, 1997, USA Today ran a front page story that brought national attention to the case. This was followed by news coverage on the ABC and NBC television networks. Okay, that's what I want to talk to you about now. Is in particular the NBC feed of this story. The NBC Nightly News. It was Tom Brokaw. I remember very well, and I'm going to tell you why. Because again, it gets very to the point of the way mainstream media covers things and their perspective on these. I've already told you how my three professors, three highly controversial truths that I brought up to them, three professors deathly afraid that I even brought up the truth to them. It's not just professors, it's journalisms too, and anchor people, and I'm going to tell you what happened with Tom Brokaw. So during this time in 1997, I had access to, wasn't my own, it was somebody I know, I'll keep them out of the loop, but high definition TV screen, huge massive TV screen with stereo surround sound, satellite TV, not the type, the little type that you get now, the huge massive satellites, the old style ones, and a descrambler. Okay, a descrambler. So we could see all the news feeds. For instance, when a network does a news feed, and they do an interview, they might interview a subject for an hour, and then, the local news van they have a little dish on top of the news van. They send out that hour-long interview to New York, the headquarters, and then New York headquarters takes that 1 hour-long interview, cuts it down to 5-10 seconds that they're going to show on TV. So because I would have the descrambler, normally you can't see this even if you had the dish, because they scramble these so that their competitors can't. NBC sends this new interview out. They don't want ABC getting their interview and then putting their interview on TV, so they descramble it so that their competitors can't get it. We had to descramble it so I can get the entire interview. I saw this entire hour-long interview. I'll get to that in a moment. But I want to talk first about Tom Brokaw and how he reacted to this situation. So finally, it's 3 months later. Finally, they're covering it. Tom Brokaw is the news anchor on, I think it was NBC Nightly News. So, and they do frequently 2 different news feeds for NBC Nightly News. They'll do an East Coast feed and a West Coast feed, and they're sometimes different. They send slightly different news to the East Coast, to the West Coast. So I watched the East Coast feed on this, and Tom Brokaw talking about it, and he led with the Phoenix UFO lights. He was scared to death, pale white. His voice was shaking. He was literally scared to death. Perhaps I could see it better because I had stereo surround sound, high definition TV, like you wouldn't believe. It was very obvious when you had that type of clarity of both sound and picture. He was frightened to death. So then, about an hour later, I got to see the West Coast feed of the same story. It was completely different. They re-recorded it. And now Tom Brokaw, instead of being scared to death, they must have pumped him full of drugs, something fierce. He looked like he just came back from a Grateful Dead concert. He was so loopy on so many drugs. He was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It was bizarre. So watching East Coast feed, he's scared to death, and West Coast feed, they pump him full of drugs, and he's like, whoa. It was just so funny. So that kind of shows the way that the news is manipulated. But even more so, I got to see the news feed of an interview. They did an interview with a family. It was a New York family. I'm certain if you see documentaries on the Phoenix Lights UFOs, you'll see this interview with this family. They're a New York family. They had dark hair. They had 2 kids, I believe, as well. But by my description of the interview, you'll be able to find it in a documentary on this subject matter. You'll say, oh yeah, that's what he was talking about. That NBC interview, I got to see the entire hour-long interview because I had a descrambler. So I could see what these people were saying long before I got to any documentary, and because NBC didn't show the really great parts of the interview. They just showed, oh yeah, we saw this thing and it was flying over us, and boom, that's it. And that's all they show. That wasn't a really fascinating part. You'd think they would show the really fascinating part. They hid the fascinating parts. Like this family said, is that they live. Phoenix is in the city proper, is in the valley, and then there's mountains surrounding Phoenix, essentially. And generally speaking, there's homes in the mountains surrounding the valley. And this family lived in the mountains surrounding the home. So as this UFO was going towards Phoenix, it was approaching Phoenix to just sit over Phoenix for hours, it was going over the mountains first. And it was really close to the mountains. It wasn't far. They said it was at least a mile long, if I remember correctly. I said it was so low that they could have taken a rock, thrown it, and hit it. They said the kids were going, it's Independence Day, it's Independence Day, it's Independence Day, like the movie Independence Day. And interestingly, also, they stated that they could kind of see through it. So while it was there and it was physical, it was also see through. Suggests to me it's one of either two. To me, it suggests it was either a hologram or this somehow has the capacity to be in it's a multiverse thing. We live in a multi-dimensional universe, and this may be a multiverse or a multi-dimensional aspect, and this thing can move between dimensions or universes. But so that was my experience with this. But first it took them national media 3 months to cover it. When they do cover it, the journalist is scared to death, and then they have to pump him full of drugs for the second feed of it, just so he can actually get through it without looking like a scared prey animal. And then the really, really great parts of the interview, they don't show. So that goes right to what my commenter was saying, the mainstream media lying by omission. Yeah, they lie by omission in several key aspects. They didn't show they didn't air the story for 3 months, and then when they do air it, they don't give you the really, really fascinating, interesting stuff that you'd really be interested in learning about. So that's it. That's my experience with the Phoenix Light UFOs. As you can see, there's a reason why I have come to distrust the mainstream media. It goes back to the 90s when back then I was in my 20s going to college, and this in 1997 when I saw this and all this happened. I said, our media is compromised. No question about it. They will hide things from you for whatever reasons. So thanks for watching, everybody. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. And hopefully I'll be doing a new video very soon for you. Thanks.